in the earlier rounds, the Iranians were trying to go after very specific military targets and Mossad in Tel Aviv. Now they are seemingly they're happy to bombard Tel Aviv, basically. So if they hit civilian areas, it's fine. So they're using a wider array of ballistic missiles. They don't have to be the latest ones, the ones with better guidance systems. So it's more of a gloves off kind of approach from the Iranians in terms of the retaliation for the Israeli attacks. Now, arguably, it looks like in terms of the numbers of missiles the Iranians have been able to launch at the Israelis, that those missiles are doing more damage in terms of the casualties and the hits that that the Israelis are suffering. But I think that is just because previously they were going after the airfields primarily. And these are quite dispersed and hardened targets. If they're going after the city specifically, then it's easier. Every missile that gets through is liable to cause significantly more damage and casualties than out in the desert going against an airbase. It's a numbers game. It's how many ballistic missiles the Iranians have got versus how many interceptors the Israelis have got, and the Israelis can push those numbers in their favor by hitting the missile bases in Iran, hitting the launchers when they move out of the bases, etc., and trying to suppress the Iranian offensive capability in Iran, as well as intercept the missiles as they're approaching Israel. I'm seeing it much more of the same, essentially, with the Iranians trying to counterattack to regain some sort of military credibility, and they really need to come out of this with something they can say: we hit the Israelis back pretty hard, we punish them for all the damage they've done and for martyring all our commanders and scientists and etc. So to gain some sort of credibility, the Iranians have really got to keep throwing things back at Israel and hoping they can get some good hits on that. And the Israelis at the same time are doing absolutely everything they can to keep Israel as safe as possible by trying to take out the launchers before they ideally before they get to launch a ballistic missile. Every ballistic missile which is destroyed in its base or on its launcher is one that doesn't need to be intercepted on its way to Israel.
Predicting Trump's foreign policy decisions is notoriously difficult. We can, I think, very more confidently say that the US will be needed to some extent to achieve a mission success in terms of significantly destroying or significantly setting back Iran's nuclear program in the long term, or at least in the medium to long term. The US is likely needed in that regard, in terms of kinetic capabilities.
Really, if the Israelis do very well, then the pressure on the Iranians to expand the war will possibly get they'll be under more pressure to expand the war, because if they can't effectively counterattack against the Israelis and they feel like they're still in a very much a humiliation position, that they've lost a lot of face, then there'll be a growing temptation to use their shorter range missiles against targets in the Gulf, i.e. US bases, Gulf air bases that are used by the US Air Force and naval bases and things like that, and expand it to the Gulf, where they've got a lot more missiles they could with the relevant range, so that they could potentially feel like we can't accept the current situation with Israel, but perhaps we can look stronger if we use our real trump card, which is really in the Gulf.
The way they tried to deter other groups before 2023 didn't work. So deterrence didn't work. They are trying to proactively go and seek out taking out threats, whether that's Hezbollah and now Iran's nuclear program. So the interests and Israel's national security interests are there, but it's sort of the emphasis is on proactive sort of destruction of enemies and the threats they pose. And then there's the opportunity side. So the recent IAEA report noted a rather large increase in not only the total stockpile, but the amount of 60% enriched uranium. It's very difficult to go from 1 to 3% of enrichment to 5%, then to 20%, that's very hard in terms of the centrifuges. It gets easier to go from 20 to 60 and then from 60 to 90 due to the way uranium hexafluoride and enrichment works. It actually is pretty easy to go from 60 to 90. Much more of the work is done at the lower levels to the sort of 20% level to the 60%. The Iranian parliament is drawing up a bill to leave. We've had threats from Iran that they'll leave before, especially in relation to the snapback sanctions that the E3 were planning to sort of do in October this year. So Iran's threatened this many times. The bill in Parliament will take time. It depends on how quickly the Iranian Parliament can get going, but it's also a good source of leverage. Global attention will be, it's a good bargaining chip to say this bill is going through Parliament while they're potentially doing other talks. So, and then Article 10, if they withdraw, that will be the withdrawal article, gives Iran 3 months notice to the NPT sort of regime, the the UNSC, etc., that they are planning on leaving. That 3 months is where negotiations can take place, etc., etc. So then, after those 3 months, Iran can formally withdraw from the NPT because under Article 10, it cites a country's supreme interests basically are in peril from being a member of the NPT. The only other country to have left the NPT is North Korea in 2003.